So, hello everybody. Thanks so much for joining me on this sunny Sunday morning. You're all in different parts of the world as well, so hopefully all the tech holds up. I'm in my shed, as I always tend to be, the place that I've made this film. Harry, how are you doing? Where are you? And tell us about the first moment that you knew dance music was in somehow going to shape your life.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Where am I? I'm in lovely West Wales in Aberystwyth, by the sea. It's lovely sunny days. I said 2 sunny days on the trot here in Wales, off to the sea in a bit with the kids and the dog. I've been here for 15 years. Fry my brain a bit with, I think, maybe too many parties. So when did I realise? Well, in my book, still available from all good, reputable booksellers. There's a moment in there in August 1988 where Rick, who's now Grace, and I go to Rock City, and we'd seen about acid house, whatever, on the paper, and obviously every time it just looked like we were that age. I was too young to be a punk, so I was, what was I, 19, 18, 19? And thought, oh, like, well, we all did here, and half the country thought, oh, drugs, new music, breaking the law, oh. And there was this thing on at Rock City in Nottingham in August '88. It was two coach loads from London, and I went to that, and I'd heard house, and I'd heard some acid tracks, I'd heard some stuff, but I'd never heard it mixed like I'd never heard music mixed like that before. And I remember saying to Rick and just saying, how long's this fucking track? But this track's been on for about 40 minutes. It's going. And we go over there, you live and learn. It's funny. So that was the first sign, and we came out of there, and that was it for me. I was all that moment, all other music suddenly became irrelevant, and the moment that's with the music, with the full MDMA music crossover was about I don't know, a few months later, a warehouse party, and Graham Park was playing, and he played Rich in Paradise, the FBI project, that particular mix. And I'd taken a tablet to work, and there was a bunch of us, and that was the moment at which I realised that not only was this music going to change my life, but this was it. We were just almost speechless. So that was the pivot, and the third one it was the outdoor bit. So we started doing house parties, and we'd be going to Glastonbury since about '85. We go to free festivals, just too young for Stonehenge, blah blah. We met a bunch of travellers in the free field in 1990s. We had the decks, we had the records, they had this PA, they had the marquee. We both had the drugs, and that was our first outdoor. And that was the moment at which not only, so we got for the music, so there's the music bit, then there's the music with the drugs bit, and then finally in the middle of 1990, it was like, right, we put these three things together, and this is this is going to be our lives for. Well, at the time we thought this was going to be our lives until the day we die, but the optimism of youth. Plus a few have died, so but yeah, anyway. Those were the pivotal moments for me.
And Simone, tell us about your moment, your light bulb moment where dance music suddenly felt like it was going to shape your life. There you
So
go.
for me, it kind of crept up on me, really. I was sort of 17, 18. I was squatting in North London, and in this little street of squats called Roden Street, which we aptly named Rodent Street. And it was like a row of, I don't know, there must have been about 10 or 12 little terraced houses, and each one was sort of had its own little vibe. And one became empty. And I was working at this place called Young's Disco Centre in Kentish Town. And I don't know, I was kind of really quite young and naive. And all these people were coming in each weekend to sort of rent out decks and mixers. And I always knew where parties were happening in either in houses or gardens or disused, I don't know, all kinds of places. And I was pretty inspired. And so this was sort of, I guess early 1990. And one of the houses in the street became empty, and we sort of took it over. My boss was away, so we cleared out all the equipment from his shop and put on a rave in one of these little terraced houses. So that's kind of like an early memory for me. I think I dipped into some little raves in central London prior to that, and sort of, I think took my first E and stuff. I don't know. It's pretty much it's a bit of a blur. I can't say there was what kind of one pivotal moment. Yeah, it just kind of crept up on me, and all of a sudden, there being sort of practical minded person that I was, just sort of working at Young's, then being nabbed by Rudy's up the road, who had bigger rigs and was hiring out his systems to bigger things, and then that's when I ended up at the squat pie that Mark and all his mates had squatted this place in Willesden, and I turned up sort of knowing how to sort of fix the generator or something. I can't actually remember. It's all in the book, but yeah, and the rest is sort of been written about quite a lot now.
And Steve, I know you were into sort of psychedelic stuff before, but then you kind of had a moment as your, that moment, that magic moment was where you felt dance music was going to somehow shape the rest of your life.
Yeah. So yeah, as you mentioned, I was into Jimi Hendrix, and I was into the Who and Jethro Tull and all these other and also hip hop music. Hip hop was kind of my generation, but I was more into that sort of 60s stuff because my friend was really into it, and he was a bit of a muse for me, and we listened to a lot of that. And actually, I remember going when I got my first car in 87 or beginning of 88. I was like 17 or 18, something like that. And I got my first car, and me and my friends all jumped in it, and we started driving around, and we were looking for like house parties on a Saturday night in Hackney. And we come across this warehouse with all these lights going off, and we were like, what the hell's in there? And we remember winding down the window, like listening to this music that was all like that was acid house. And at the time, we weren't looking for that. We were looking for a house party, a hip hop or a reggae or, something just like, so we were like, oh, fuck that. We drove off and we went off somewhere else. And then my friend's sister and boyfriends were going to the M25 raves in kind of 88 and 89. And we would be at home and we would be at his house, and we'd be smoking weed and listening to the Who. And then they'll turn up at like 6 a.m, like bug-eyed and like kind of like, on one. And we're like, where the fuck have you been? Oh, you got to come to these raves. They're amazing, And it kind of coincided really well in 1989 because there was a Woodstock 89 rave going on in Woodstock, Oxfordshire. And we kind of just clicked the two things. They've been saying, come to this raves all the time. We're going, we're going to sit at home and listen to Jethro Tull and smoke loads of weed. And so it kind of combined. And so Woodstock 89, it made perfect sense. And we went there, and actually that was where I took my first acid. Took half a tab of acid and danced for like, I don't know, 10 hours. Can't remember much about it other than it was raining. And Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds came into my head with all this music, and that was it. From that point onwards, the music in my life changed to house music, acid house music, and that was when I started going to Tears, which later became Labyrinth at the Four Aces, and that was it really. So yeah, it was, I believe, in August 1989 at Woodstock 89, the 20th anniversary of Woodstock.
Yeah, and I think one thing I've obviously that we've drawn on in the film is that I think all three of you were all a little bit later at that field in Glastonbury in 1990. So we'll start with you, Stephen, and we'll go to Simone and back to Harry again. But so obviously Glastonbury still plays a big part in your life, but that field was kind of something I think new to you at that time. So yeah, tell us about that moment as well, that summer of 1990.
Yeah, absolutely. That I think it's like what Harry just said. Actually, with the strings coming together, there was the music because like I say, I wasn't really into heavy drugs. I was into smoking weed, drinking a bit of rum. Right. I thought I was, East London Jamaican at the time. So, and then the music came, and it was the music that grabbed me. And then going to Glastonbury in 1990 with the same friends, and we went there, and we weren't expecting to see the rave at all. It wasn't part of it. Um, and yeah, heading down to the Travellers Field, what I now know is the Travellers Field, in that southeast corner, and coming across just the amazing people. First of all, the amazing acid. They had really good acid, and it was a lot cheaper than it was in London. And then just finding that tent, and that was it. That was the tent that you stayed in there. I did. I stayed in there, and I think I went back to the cinema tent once or twice to go to sleep because I didn't have a tent or didn't have anything. We just went there with the clothes we had on our back, and that was the point where everything changed for me. My whole existence. I didn't even know it at the time. Obviously, I thought I was just having a rave, going to a party and having a rave. But realistically, what happened at that party was, all these other people that were there obviously influenced somehow, because nothing came away from that with completely different views on life, on existence, on the traveling community. Because previous to that, being a council estate kid in London, travelers, gypsies they were dirty people that lived on an abandoned wasteland, and we were kind of trained to dislike them. We were trained that they were dirty, stinking, thieving, whatever's. And that clearly wasn't true. But we were kids, and that's what our elders were saying, and that's what it was, and the society said. So that's how we went. And after that, well, actually, way before that, I changed my mind on that particular thing. That's another story. But after going to Glastonbury 1990, my whole life kind of just went down that road. And I guess what it is when you come across something that holds you and nurtures you, as that field did in 1990, the people, the music, everything that just, it was like getting a massive hug. And when you do that, you don't want to let it go. So you kind of gravitate back to that vibe. So when I left there and went back to London, my whole life kind of focused towards going back to that, and that happened to be via the free party scene movement that was in London at the time.
And Simone, so tell us about your experience of that Glastonbury 90. Who did you go down with? Who did you meet? What was your memory of it?
Yeah, so it was in the little street of squats that I was telling you about before, and someone from there. I mean, I was like the baby, really. I think I was like 18 or something. But someone had got a ban and like, right, we're all piling, we're all gonna go to this big festival called Glastonbury that I'd never actually fucking heard of. Even though like growing up, I was really like 80s kid, really into music and everything. I don't know. Anyway, so we all bundled in the back of this van, got down there, I can't remember if I think we went under a fence. We all piled in anyway. Like Steve was saying, no tents, no nothing. And I remember he said about the cinema tent. I'm sure I slept in that cinema tent as well at some point. But yeah, so arriving at this place just blew my mind. And it was, it's not like the Glastonbury that we know today. It was much, 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 even though it was massive for us at the time, it was much smaller. And sort of, wandering around. I think, I dropped some acid as well, and just remember walking along the railway track, and there's all these kind of strange looking people, so like East trips mushrooms, East trips mushrooms hash, East trips mushrooms, and kind of, and then sort of being lured into that, tent likewise. And just like, wow, I just never felt so. I'd kind of always grown up being the sort of the black sheep of the family and not really fitting in anywhere. And I just really felt that I'd found home. It was just like, oh wow, it was incredible. And I think that that changed my life too. I just kind of felt really connected with the place, really connected with the people. Had some egg butties and smoked weed and dropped acid and kind of went with it.
Were you there with any of the other what were become the Spirals, or were you just there with other mates?
No, interesting. So there's some people that squat, but I'd already, because we'd done a couple of parties by that point in the squats. So I was friendly. I knew Sticker, Fundamental, and was like going to his parties. I think Debbie and Hubert. I knew them. Tim. A lot of those kind of people, like, kind of had come into my life and were part of our like little crew. And I don't know, it's like it's a real kind of meshy moment, where sort of the tribe started to form, I guess. People that sort of you're regularly dancing with and spending weekends sort of staying up all night and into the early hours. And so that Glastonbury was kind of mental, really. That we all found ourselves there, and that Tonka tent was was banging. It was like a whole new dimension to my life.
And Harry, obviously, you lot also had a tent there, the famous Stonehenge pyramid. It forms part of
the
both
Hawkwind tent.
The Hawkwind tent, and there's something. I mean,
Yeah.
we focus on it a bit in the film. In a way, there's a sort of mystical element to the fact that it's the pyramid, and then the KLF turned up because they saw the pyramid, and I think it's kind of a great story that it came from the Hawkwind days and Stonehenge and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the three of us are probably laughing with the egg butties, and we probably all stood next to each other, the three of us, for 2 days without realising. But as a lot of people were, but yeah, I mean, we sort of, before we came to Hawaii in sort of the winter of '89. So I did our first thing in November '89 as DIY. So we've been going for 6 months, and we've been doing house parties. We'd done a couple of pay. We did the first pay rave. It was a $5. But we'd done house parties. But the police turn up every time because it's not very hard for them to turn up in the city, is it? In Nottingham. What we wanted was to just never stop. We just wanted to be able to do this house party instead of the police turning up at 3 a.m. And so we'd been going to Glastonbury since about '85. Never paid. Still never paid. No offence to anyone. Sorry, Michael, leave it. I've been 19 times, never paid a penny. No, but that year, when we 85, you just walk in. You just walk around the gate and up the road a bit and you get in. But that year, 1990, I think we'd been in '89. I remember someone playing Acid House. And but it wasn't a vibe thing. That's what I remember anyway. There's a few debates, but 90, we packed the decks, we packed the mixer, we packed some records, we packed a few pills. Just thought, well, fucking who knows? I mean, we ended up just in a Luton van, just drove through a roadblock, drove around the back, ended up in what became, as you say, known as the Travellers, the free field, and we were just out there. And then Jack, just these little things of history. Jack, who's one of our DJ, has been since the early days. He said, he's with Chili Phil, he's with some of the Travellers, and they've got a marquee, they've got the Hawkwind marquee, they've got a sound system. They're getting some kickback from the Travellers, but there's about 6 of them really want to do a raid. Do you know anyone who's got decks in a mixer? And they went, well, fucking check this out. And open the back of the van. There's like 11 people in there, pyrotechnics. Not these digital days when you need a whole room full of tech. There's the 2 Technics decks, a shitty Vestax mixer, some records. You're right, walked in there. It was like exactly right as Steve said. It's like it was one long hug psychedelic, blissed out, eat up. The music's fantastic, but the people, one long hug. But so we had the tent down the bottom, but we got kicked off as your mate is doing the thing, it's about 2000. But the Narcos kicked us off on get your disco shit off, so we just went back up to Tonka. We were laughing for years because we danced for so long. We actually dug bowls in the dust. We like on the floor, but the atmosphere in there, and then obviously Happy Monday's the next thing. Looking around, and Bez and Sean Ryan and Happy Monday's in there, and the next thing there's a fucking horse. I remember Rick just taps me on the shoulder like that and goes like that. I was what? I was like, it's a fucking horse. And I was like, I mean, this is fucking having it. I mean, this isn't bending the rules. This is just taking the rules and just absolutely just fucking, flushing them down the toilet. No, which party went on till this time? We've got a fucking horse on the dance floor. We've got Happy Mondays. The next thing, in R10, the KLF, Jimmy Corty, who I've since got to know quite well, great guys, him and Bill. Jimmy was more ravey than Bill. This massive, one of them massive like beaver hunting hats on. He just comes up and says, I know this is in the film, it's a well-worn tale that's so good. And he just comes up and says, can you put this tape on? I'm like, what is it? He goes, it's a song called What Time Is Love. So, it's all set up for vinyl. We had to get an audio tape deck. Who remembers them? Plug it in with the audio, like, right, put it on, and it just comes on, and the whole place just went fucking mental. I mean, proper mental with a capital M. And it was just the whole place. It's the first time the track had ever been played anywhere. And as you said to me, and I put it in the book, we were blessed by the KLF in the Pyramid at our first ever outdoor party. And it was like, and it was a bit like that famous saying about the first Velvet Underground albums, so yeah, only 10,000 people bought it, but every single one of them went on to form a band. And it's like, yeah, there was that only probably 2,000 or 3,000, couple of thousand people in both. I mean, there's the Tonka one was bigger. It didn't get stopped, but it's probably 2,000 people. Every single one of those fucking people probably started a sound system. And it was everything. It was the weather. It was the horse. It was the thing. It was the World Cup year. There was this kind of everything. There was, not the weather was fantastic. It was the last year. There was no police on site. Yeah, it was epoch making. It was without a doubt, and it was the connections that were made. And this is what without us just having put if we hadn't just shoved those decks in that Luton van on the Thursday night, I wouldn't exist, because we wouldn't have met the crew that we met in the tent that we did, and they wouldn't have rung us up 2 weeks later and said, do you want to come do a free party at Pepperbox Hill near Salisbury? Yeah, what's a free party? We didn't say the word. The free didn't exist as a name. Do you want to come do a party? Well, how much it's going to? Well, we're not going to charge. We're like, fucking hell, it's a bit okay. Where? That's some Pepperbox Hill National Trust place near Salisbury. We're like, yeah, okay. We'll bring the decks. We'll bring the mixer. And we literally had a fucking table, just a shit table that you get, not even fit for school. Those ones that keep collapsing, and the record, But none of that. Looking back, none of that would ever have happened if we hadn't been for those meetings at Glastonbury in 1990. But I guess those things, they happen once a generation, and that was the moment for that generation. I mean, obviously Castlemorton, which is an equally epoch-defining thing, but to me, in a way, it was almost like Glastonbury 90 was the start of something, and Castlemorton for me was kind of the end of something.
You kind of had some you'd been to free festivals and things like that before, hadn't you? So you kind of knew the travelling scene, but obviously this kind of meeting between the acid house thing and the travelling thing was new. So just tell us a little bit about what I suppose you understood as a sort of the travelling lifestyle was up to that point, and then how that I suppose changed after that Glastonbury.
I first went to a free festival near Darwin, near Blackburn, where I grew up, near Bolton, near Manchester, Lancashire. was probably about 16. Pickup Bank Festival, and it was one of those ones when you had the drug board. I saw a photo one the other day, and it's like acid 50p, line of speed quid, line of coke 2 quid. You know, just the fact that you could just have it shamelessly outside your tent, not wanting to promote drugs in any way, shape, or form. And hey, kids, drugs aren't good for you sometimes. But I was just we just looked at it as if we were like 16, 17, thought, fucking hell, how much have you got? 4 quid? Let's get in there. But what? Not just that, it was just the freedom. It was the freedom, capital freedom. That was, to me, all the way through school, all the way through whatever. My mate, it was just the freedom. Everything, especially growing up in Bolton in the 70s, 80s, is a very, very violent place. Everything shuts at 11, if the best you'd get is a shit club that went on till 2, or a shit house party. We just were. It's just, and then you go to a gig, and the gig finished at 11. The Manchester Apollo or whatever, it's like a quid a pint in those days. Fucking outrageous. But you know, everything was so restricted, and it was just the freedom up there. It was just that we're under the stars, people sitting around a fire. And the lifestyle and the freedom then, the lifestyle. So pre-Bean, this you know, this is pre-Beanfield, you know, this is pre-80s. This is I was just too young to make it to Stonehenge, which has always pissed me off. But one last I went to was Wick Festival. And it had become really sad by then, the travel lifestyle by then. There was just a lot of heroin. There's the brew crew. It become negative. But for those years, again, I mean, you know, if you want to get philosophical, like Hegel, you know, like the thesis, antithesis, and the synthesis, you know, the dialectic. It's the same with any scene, from rock and roll to LSD to rock to punk rock. Something happens. There's an idea. It starts. It explodes. It germinates. It withers, and it implodes and dies. You know, it's the same with everything. It's sort of inevitable. But those early years of travel, it was lovely.
And Sim, obviously you were sort of squatting, so I mean, from everybody I've talked to, that there was a bit of an overlap between the sort of urban squatting world and some elements, at least, of people who had buses and sort of lived traveling. Was that your experience, or did you not really know about the traveling side, or was the squatting thing? Was there some sort of link between the two in some way?
So I think there was potentially a tenuous thread on the squatting front. I guess there was like 1 or 2 people that had perhaps been traveling sort of in the 80s, because like I said, they were all a bit older than me. I think for me, it just was a massive learning curve. I mean, we, as the tribe sort of took shape, and we were doing sort of inner city squatted parties and like little warehouse do's and stuff. And then when we went as a crew out to a festival, I can't remember when it was, some point in like April or May or something, and we arrived in a couple of cars. But, you know, DIY were there. And it was just, for us, it was like, oh, this really fuses. This really works. This is what we've got to do, you know. And so for us, I think we're just, well, for me, I can only speak for myself, but it was a massive learning curve. I mean, it felt completely right. It felt like this is definitely what needs to be done now. You know, we jumped in our van with our rig, and that was it. You know, sleeping, you know, was like under the truck or in the back of the truck or whatever. So we were really dependent on the knowledge and the wisdom of the traveling community that had been sort of like, you know, living sustainably. And yeah, it was a massive learning curve, basically. We were very eager to sort of learn and watch and observe how they were doing things, and kind of trying to sort of, in a very practical way, make that work for us as well. So we weren't sort of always buying egg butties, and I think we made a load of flapjacks to sell. That was our first foray into sort of festival trading. And yeah, and then all of a sudden you're just living it anyway, so that you become really practical. You've obviously got to go into the woods, bury your shit, etc., etc. You're going to need diesel for your generator if you want to run the rig. All that kind of stuff, having a gas burner to cook up a load of pasta or whatever it was. We sort of just found a way to make it work. And it was obviously a bit different because we were mostly coming out of the city. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it was this big sort of fuse. And like Harry said, some people saw it as an annoying thing, I guess. But like you said, the scene had kind of peaked and gone into a bit of a decline with all the smack going on and the brew crew and everything. So I think we fused in a bit of new life, and not just us, obviously, all the perfect marriage of listening to techno or whatever house music as it back then, without it being stormed by the police and turned off at 3 a.m. It was, for us, it was the perfect marriage.
And Steve, I seem to remember when we had our conversation, you kind of once you'd got a sound system together and we're doing kind of some of the outdoor parties as well, that you kind of struck up a bit of a connection with the horse drawn and you would sort of follow them around or something. So just tell us a little bit about that sort of interconnection with, I suppose, the sort of traditional traveling scene with what you ended up doing.
Yeah, so for me and I think for Bedlam Sound System, we after Glastonbury, that was where I first met the traveling community, and there was a bit of a gap really from that year. I went down the raving London, a bit of like, let's say, a little bit of a regular club thing going on in Hackney at the Four Aces, but and then when we decided to get a rig, which was in '91. We didn't get it in '91. We decided to get it in '91. I think that there was the element of, well, we need something to carry it in, so we need a vehicle. And during that period, from 1990 to like end of '91, when we decided to get a rig, like I said, my life had changed a lot in terms of, it went down the squatting route, it went down the kind of parties and taking ecstasy and acid, going to raves. But I also met a lot of people who were living out in Wales and the Piod, again, it was to do with trade. We were trading hash for mushrooms. So I had this little thing going on with these people in the Piod, where I would drive up there with some hash, and then we'd go mushroom picking. They would give us bags of mushrooms. We'd bring them back to London, and there was a bit of a trade going on. And so I met these community out there. They weren't traveling on a traveling site as such. They were living out there, but they were all hippies, TPs, and they were living in vehicles and so on. And so that was a kind of another next connection. And then I guess in London, a lot of the sound systems, the Tribe for one, and Circus Lunatic and that, they were all getting vehicles. And it was a natural progression. It made sense that we had to keep on the move. We had to keep on the move to keep stealth a little bit. We had to carry our rig. We had to have somewhere to sleep. And then with the connection with the traveling community, for me, it was on one of these little trading missions I went on around the West Country. I came across the Funny Farm, which was Circus Walk, where Circus Walk was. And I remember going there. And that was, for me, the first time outside of Glastonbury where I'd met travellers who moved and lived in vehicles. And I remember going there, and I remember it just being really quite, don't know, the people were really colourful. Maybe it was on the day I was there. Don't know, it was just really bright. And, Jess and everyone made this amazing decor and everything, And that was for me when I went, right, this is outside of Glastonbury, outside of parties. This is a life. This is not just a thing, And so then I went back to the Piod and got my first vehicle, which was a comma walkthrough van, kitted out. And I was like, yeah, I never had a driving license or anything, but I got my first vehicle, and took it back to London and started living in that on site. And then the progression was, like you say, about the horse drawn. The connection with the horse drawn was, I remember that they would take sites. and people would go to their sites because they couldn't move very fast, right? And so we would go to their sites, and that was the connection. You know, there was a guy called Will who was like lovely bloke, and he was kind of like the connection for us, and we'd be in touch with him and where are you guys going to be, you know, and where's the party going to be, and we'd go to that party. And I think that what Harry was saying about the traveling community and the raves and how it was affected, I think it was all true. It was a version of death for the traveling community, and it was a massive revitalization of that community by people coming from the city, who were fucked off with being in the city, basically. You know, we were doing parties all of, you know, we did loads of parties in the city in the winter. At the beginning of '92 when we first got our rig, did loads of parties, and then we were just like, we've got all these vehicles, we've got everything, and then it was like, right, we need to get out, and we'd go to the traveling community, and it was true. Some travelers we'd have proper arguments with them. You know, you turn up on a site, and they knew you weren't from the community, and they'd try and stop you and go, get the fuck off, we ain't having a party here. And then you'd have other travelers come and go, oh, you fucking leave them alone. Do you know what I mean? Let them come in. And so there was a real push-pull situation with them, and I guess some people wanted to keep their status quo for whatever reason, and others were like, no, fuck this. This is a movement. It has to flow. It has to go forward. It has to. We need new blood. And we were, you know, all of us, we were all the new blood. You know, that inspired it to turn into something new and revitalize it. I mean, I was too young for any of those festivals in the 80s. Like Woodstock '89 was my first outdoor kind of event. But yeah, I'm with Harry. I wish I was old enough to do Stonehenge and some of those other ones. But I just wasn't. I was a young kid, and you know, for me, getting out there when we left, I think we left in May '92. We left London after a party in Camberwell Bus Garage, I think it was. I think we went from seeing timelines. This is one of my I'm trying to remember what the fuck happened back then, and I can't. It's a bit jaded. So I know we went from Hayes, made some party there, to Camberwell Bus Garage, where we blew up all of our rig and we had to fix it all. And then we were like, let's get the fuck out of London, and then we left in May. And I think I can't remember, Tubney Woods, somewhere like that was the first thing we went to. I'm going to find out one day. I'm going to do what you did and ask people.
You know, at that point, I think there were more and more sound systems sort of obviously appearing and doing things on the road. Was there any kind of, I mean, between the three of you, sound systems or other sound systems, was there any kind of like friendly competitiveness or any kind of argy-bargy, or were generally people like, oh yeah, you have that bit over there? How did it work? How did it self-organize, I suppose? And you know, was there any is there any grief between any of the sound systems or ego, I suppose?
I mean, I don't remember. I mean, I don't remember. I remember. I mean, Bedlam and the Tribe used to do parties every weekend in London, and it would be either together or separate. And often we'd do them separate. We were very much East London based. You know, we'd do a bit of West London. We were very much East London based. And I remember times when we'd both be doing parties, and we'd both get busted, or one would get busted, and the other one would ring up and go, "Hey, what are you doing? Where are you? We're over here." And we'd just go to them, or they would come to us. You know, I remember Edmonton being a really good one, where we would set up in this warehouse. It was one of my most memorable parties. And we were set up in the warehouse inside, and the Tribe had been busted over West London somewhere. And we got this phone call. Yeah, we had mobiles back then, but well, bricks like that. They got in touch with us and said, "What are you doing?" And we told them where we was, and they came over to the warehouse. There wasn't a second room in this warehouse, so there was a flatbed lorry outside the warehouse, and the Tribe set up on the lorry outside the warehouse on the street. You know, I don't know how long. I can't remember how long it lasted, but no, for us it was definitely camaraderie. It was definitely, you know, a more of a let's just get on with, let's just have a fucking party vibe. I don't think Bedlam never really did anything with DIY. I don't think. I remember the time when we were asked to come down to Brighton to do a party in Brighton. I think it was for Felix, and we were like, yeah, and we were in Fordham Park. We were set up in Fordham Park. We were like, yeah, fuck it, we'll come down to Brighton. And on the way down to Brighton, we'd got a phone call going, oh, we don't need you guys anymore because DIY have turned up. And we were like, oh, well, we're on our way anyway. Do you know what I mean? We'll just turn up. Do you know what I mean? And then we got our rig nicked en route. We actually broke down in our truck en route, and a guy turned up with a van. We flagged him down and said, "Mate, we're broken down. Can you take our rig to this party?" He was like, "Yeah." Anyway, we got to the party with this rig in this guy's van. And because the DIY had already set up there, and they were like, no, we don't want to have two sound systems. It would be just too much of a clash or whatever. So we were like, all right, fuck it. Do you know what I mean? We'll just come and party. And then the guy who had the rig in the van drove off with it and nicked it. So, and I mean, that's another whole story about how we got it back, but we did get it back. But, but yeah, I don't think DIY and Bedlam ever did party together. I might be wrong about that, but.
And Simone, can you remember the same question, I suppose? Can you remember sort of, the vibe between sound systems? I'm sure there was moments of like, oh, you're on our patch or whatever, but maybe there wasn't. Maybe it was all, harmonious and
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. I mean, I think we were so kind of wrapped up in what we were doing and getting carried along by this sort of wave of stuff. I mean, like Steve says, yeah, we often used to do stuff together or in tandem or whatever. I think I remember DIY being at Longstock, which was kind of one of the literally our first foray independently with our rig into a kind of traveller's field, and that's when we learned about. Well, I learned about. I hadn't heard about the Battle of the Beanfield, but communing with those travellers. I think DIY were there with a pyramid tent, and we had a kind of mad pyramid tent as well. It was like ours was sort of metal. And I don't know if I remember this or I've watched your film, Aaron. I don't know. But I don't, we even sang about, Bedlam circus, normal circus, walk, Armageddon. We were totally up for it. No rivalry, no, at all. There was no time for that. And we were all kind of dependent on each other as well, in some way or shape, whether it was like knowing where the next outdoor place was going to be. Yeah, I mean, no, it wasn't a time for ego. I mean, I'm sure some crept in, in the heat of the moment, that period, 1990 to 1992 after Castlemorton, definitely it was a ride, and you were on it, and there wasn't the time or the space or the need for ego and sort of patch and stuff like that.
I'm just laughing that we were mentioning both of those. No, I would say 99.9% of the time, actually, the lack of friction was amazing. The cooperation was amazing. I was just giggling at Steve's. I don't know. I didn't know you were there. I didn't know you were at that. So we were doing party in Plumpton on Felix. He's still DJing these days. Felix's land, and we were there. And we had a big rig set up in a valley, and the next thing, a techno said to us, it turns out to be Bedlam, and they're like, I said, look, you can't put it there. It's like 100 yards away from a house sound system. It's just going to clash. And there was a little tiny bit of, and it was never between the main people. It was never between, there's often a few, there's always a couple of idiots in any scene anywhere, isn't there? Whatever it is, punk. There's a couple of, we've got a couple of lads, they had a couple of lads, and they were getting me argy-bargy. And I said, look, why don't you go down there, enough distance, get enough distance, and you do what you fucking want. And come back to Swans, nicked it anyway. I didn't know you were there, mate. I didn't know. And someone said that someone's nicked all their amps, so they can't set up. And we're like, well, that solved that problem then, hasn't it? There was a friendly rivalry with Spiral Tribe. I know that someone actually said to me once, it's like, you're the Beatles and Spiral Tribe are the Rolling Stones, because you're northern and they're southern. And then there was this, I guess we were probably the two most notorious, infamous, whatever, sound systems. And we had difference with, you know, we were quite diametric. What we were very northern, they were southern. Our music was fluffy. They called fluffy. We called nosebleed techno, as Mark's to this day takes the piss. Mark. And then it turned out we both had the same fucking name. Also, Mark Harrison and Mark Harrison, which is just weird. And I remember chatting to Mark at Castlemorton, and there was a musical. There was a bit of it. We were music. We were music fascists. We were house music. We would not let people play hardcore or happy hardcore. You know, when those things came along, we just would not let anyone play on our sound system. But at the centre of it, there was no hostility whatsoever. In fact, you think about it, compared to like punk rock or heavy metal or, you know, some of those mass traveller brawls in the 80s, you know, I think, and the amount of drugs we were all doing and the amount of sleep that we didn't have, you just look, I think we did really well. We did well, you know. I think considering the amount of stress we were under, the amount of sleep, the police, the chaos, the chasing, the drugs, the arrests, the weather, anything else, you know, I think we got on very well.
So my main big question, I suppose, is what is the one thing you feel like is not in the film that you kind of would have liked to have got across? What was the one thing that you feel like it would have been great, or you felt could have been in the film that wasn't?
You said it. Camaraderie said to me, "There's three people there." So it was after one of the Q&As, and someone said, "What did you think?" And someone from Spiral Tribe, I thought there was a bit too much DIY in it, and then someone from TR said, "I thought there was too much Spiral Tribe in it," and someone thought there was a bit too much Bedlam in it. But which is quite funny. So each person thought. Anyway, there we are. So you obviously got it right, didn't you? So I think it's brilliant. I'm amazed by some of that footage. When I first started, if you just said when we first spoke in 2018, if you just said, "Oh, there must be some footage somewhere of Chip in Sodbury," and I said, "You got fucking no chance, mate. You've done amazingly well on getting some of that footage." And in terms of anything missing, I think there probably is a bit too much. I do feel a bit self-conscious. We get quite a big Billy. I'm not sure we were quite that pivotal, but I'll take it. So there we are.
And then Sim, is there one story you feel like is a funny thing that you would have imagined being included? Or
Mate, my memory is notoriously bad. So your film literally pieced together a period of my life that you know, was just like one big blur. So I can't fault it in any way. And as for kind of coming up, you know, I think you covered all the sort of biggies. I mean, the rest for me is all a blur. It's like, wasn't it just one big party for 2 years? I don't know. You know, that's how it feels like to me. So your film, I think you've done an amazing job. You know, I say to people when they watch it, you know, every bit of footage is not just shoved in there from random things that look good. That is actual footage you've done, you know, in a time where there were no mobile phones, no, you know, nobody kind of had their 35 million in their pocket, really. The odd few that made it through to this film. It's incredible. I can't fault it in that respect. You've done an incredible job. So yeah, no, thank you for doing that. You know, along with like Harry's book, Mark's book, and the film. It's like, oh, it's all got a bit more clarity for me now. So yeah.
Even if there's not a thing that you wish was in the film, is there something that that is an important aspect that you feel like, you know, is worth fleshing out? I suppose the other areas that could have been talked about more, or it's just an opportunity now to sort of mention some other aspects of the story, I suppose.
There's two things I do want to mention about the film itself, because when we first met here on the boat, and I didn't know you from Adam. You'd been you know, Murph had said Gen 16. Murph said, "Yes, he's cool," you know, and obviously doing a lot of these sort of interviews and stuff like that. I wanted to make sure that it was going to be genuine, right? So I remember saying to you, you know, I don't want it to be about just the big names. I don't want it to be a thing about drugs, even though drugs is a major part of it. I don't want it just to be about that. I don't want it to be about the violence or the news articles and all the rest of it, right? And I praise you for that, because I think you definitely, whether you had it in your head already or whether you took it on from that, I don't know, but I feel like you've done a really good job of getting the story and the family and the lifestyle of what we were part of, are part of. So I think, yeah, that's a real praise, I think, for you and your research. I don't know how the fuck you've done it, like the footage. So, and also, I wish that now, in hindsight, I wish that we had half a thought about documenting what we did. Because there's hardly any footage of Bedlam parties or photographs or anything, and I noticed that from the films, like, it's a lack of stuff. And I think when I talk to my crew, our crew about it, and they all say the same thing independently. Well, we were just too busy having a fucking party, weren't we, to think about that, which is great. But now I still wish that we'd actually done it. In terms of what I would love to, and this is just in general, is there was one scene, there was one party, which I wished, I had a fly on the wall camera for the whole thing, because it was just the most perfect party. It was the Unigate building on the A40, from finding the building to breaking into the building, and it went on. It was a 2 week. We did two parties there, and the first week the police came, and there's definitely an image. If you could find that camera that you were talking about and go back in time and find everything, there's literally a picture of me doing that to the police chief when he asked to come in. I was like, no, you can't come in. And that, and then so the next week when we did the same party and the same, he preempted that, and he brought the heavies, as in the fire brigade, down, because he was like, we can't technically shut down your party. I don't know why. There were laws in place for him to just come in and stop it, but he seemed to think there wasn't. So he brought the fire brigade down to shut the party down under safety measures. And I walked the fire brigade through the party, and as we knew this was happening, back then we had a second generator set up with just lighting, emergency lighting. So if something happened, which it often did, we'd pull this generator cord and lighting would go on. And when we walked through with the fire brigade, literally you could see people ripping down backdrops off the wall. You could see them disappearing in the distance to stop that. And I remember walking around, showing the emergency lighting, going, right, let's turn on the emergency lighting, turn on the emergency lighting. All the lights came on. Everyone went, whoa, what's going on? We turn it off again. And then we walked up the stairs to where the little second chill out room was. And there was an escape door out the back. And I said to someone, get that fucking door open, because obviously we'd locked it, because we were taking donations on the door. And I could hear the kicking as we were walking up the stairs, of somebody kicking the fuck out of this door. And the door opened up, and behind it there was a bit of wood, and this bit of wood fell down. The door opened up, and it was a perfect walkway out as a fire escape. And the fire brigade walked around to the front, and obviously he's a very official person, right? He's in his uniform and everything. He's the head of the fire brigade. And he walks around to the front, and the chief of police, or whatever, the superintendent for that area, was standing there, and they have a conversation, and you could see this copper's face, that at the very point when the fire brigade chief had said to him, I can't see any problems. and that was it. And he lost his shit, and we all just cheered, and there was lots of that going on. And he left, and we carried on, and then he shut the A40 down instead and caused a massive backlog. But that would have been a great bit of video. If we ever do a film about that would be in my film, if I did a film. But yeah, but other than that, I think your research has been impeccable, and so well done for that. We needed less of our crew telling anyone with a camera to fuck off. That's basically what happened. If you had a camera, you were a copper, and you could fuck off.
The things that I've discovered is treasure, really, and a massive
That
thanks.
is treasure. You did an amazing job.
Yeah.
Amazing
Yeah.
job.
Well, an enormous thanks to the filmmakers and photographers that did take
Yeah.
photos back then, and I'm in debt to them, and we're going to do a little film a little bit like this. I just want to say a massive thanks, guys,
Right. Yes.
doing this. I really, really appreciate it, and also for all of your support in getting the film out there and over the line, and being on Q&A panels, and Sim and the crew for inviting me to the exhibitions, and Steve for getting me into Glastonbury twice to talk to you, and for Harry for being basically a shoulder to cry on for about 5 years while we were both finishing our projects.
I can't believe you're still going, mate. We started writing doing the film. I remember during lockdown before COVID, it was about 2019.
Yeah,
And I finished the book, but I'm like, I can't. You're still fucking at it.
I know.
We're all still alive and kicking, and that's great.
Yeah.
And big up to all of you.
Yeah.
Big up to everyone. Well done, everyone.